Welcome to the Timescales Interviews. I'm Grego, your host, and today I have a very special guest, author and biographer, the extraordinary James Hogg. Hi, Mr. Hogg, how are you?
I'm very well. Very well. Hello from Leeds, England. How are you?
Okay,
You
hello, hello from San Francisco. What's it like there today?
It's wet as always. Probably about 13 degrees and thoroughly miserable. But we don't follow the weather, so it's okay. It's all right. We're used to this. We're used to this.
Okay. Well, summer has officially ended here. We've seen geese migrating, and this morning it's almost cold. So we're kind of glad that the summer is over.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that your book, Bernard Who, is going to be released in an audio format here in just a couple of days. I have that on pre-order.
Well, it's not my book. It's Bernard's book. So which I should point out. So it's Bernard's autobiography that that I helped him to write. So I'm a biographer, but I'm also a ghostwriter. So I persuaded Bernard to write his autobiography not that many years ago, but quite a few years ago. Unfortunately, he consented, but that was my job, was to help him get his life down on a page in the first person. So as opposed to it being in the third person, a biography, which I've done before. You usually write biographies about people who are no longer with us. And when I spoke to Bernard, he fortunately very much was with us. So it's very much Bernard's book.
Okay. And now you say you convinced him to do it. So you approached Mr. Cribbins and said, I would like to write your autobiography?
Yeah, well, I was writing a biography about a guy called Richard Briers, who was he actually appeared in an episode of Doctor Who with Sylvester McCoy. He played a baddie who was based quite overtly on Adolf Hitler. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with the Sylvester McCoy years. I'm more of a John Pertwee, Tom Baker man myself. So Richard was died a few years ago. Died nearly 10 years ago. 10 years ago. He's a national treasure. A very, very popular actor. Appeared in anything from Shakespeare to sitcoms, like Bernard, very, very versatile. And I interviewed Bernard for Richard's book. And I said to him at the end of the interview, why haven't you done a book? You've been a national treasure since the late 50s, really, early 60s. And he said something like, oh, my wife keeps telling me I should do it, and blah, blah, blah. Bernard was an intensely private man. Not many people knew where Bernard lived. They knew he was married to Jill. He kept himself to himself. He liked fishing. You didn't know much about Bernard. So I didn't think anything would come of it. I thought there's no chance. And fortunately, he got back in touch and said, yeah, I'm up for this. I think Jill, his wife, who passed away, I think about 6 months before Bernard, gave him a kick up the arse and said, come on, you've got to do this. Time is running out. He was probably about 88. Or no, he was probably about 86, 87 actually at the time. And fortunately, he said, yeah, let's do it. Because obviously when he goes, he wasn't a diarist. So when someone like Bernard goes, he didn't do a huge amount of interviews. So when he goes, everything else goes with him. All the memories, etc. Everything goes with him. So we had this opportunity to get everything down before it happened. And unfortunately, it did happen. It happened last year.
Okay, wonderful. I want to cover this book with you a little bit more, but real briefly here, so watchers and listeners can get to know you a little bit. Can you tell us what is an average day in life like as James Hogg?
Well, mainly, I'm a ghostwriter. Mainly, I don't do biographies anymore. They're too much like hard work. The money isn't very good. They're labours of love these days. Not many biographies appear on the shelves in mainstream bookshops and supermarkets, etc., because they're just not in vogue at the moment. So I don't particularly like having a book with my own name on it, because you have all the responsibility that goes with that. So I much prefer writing books for other people. So at the moment, I'm doing a book with a guy called Gunter Steiner, who is a Formula One supremo. He runs
Mhm.
he runs the only American team, actually, Haas. And he's the team principal. He's the star of Drive to Survive, which is the big Netflix F1 show. And I'm following him around. We had a book that came out in April, which did very, very well globally. So we're doing another one. So I was with him in Singapore a couple of weeks ago, interviewing him around the Grand Prix, having a chat, going out for dinner, and I'm doing the same in Brazil, Sao Paulo, in a couple of weeks. And so that's my day. And then I'll beaver away and write the book, and so basically I spend my time talking to famous people and then going somewhere hot and writing their book. That's it in a nutshell. It's not a bad way to make. It's better than working anyway. So yeah.
Sounds like fun too. I've been following you on Twitter for quite some time now, and I did know that you're a fan of Formula One racing. And my father was a huge racing fan, but in a different format. It was dirt track racing,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and stock cars and paved half miles,
yeah. Yeah.
and midget cars. So are you primarily a Formula One fan?
No, I've done books with touring cars, which are saloon cars, so road cars where you're racing 160 miles an hour and you're that far away from the person in front, etc. That sort of thing, which I think is probably more exciting in many ways to Formula One. Formula One is far more. It's huge. It's technical. The strategy is are immense. It's far more involved, which is why you've got I think there are only two global major sports in the world that are genuinely popular the world over. It's soccer, obviously, which is
Hmm.
by far and beyond the biggest, and F1.
Hmm.
There are basketball. No other sport travels that globally. Yet in F1, in football, you've got thousands of professional teams, hundreds of thousands of professional athletes. In F1, you've got 10 teams and 20 drivers. That's it. Then it's Formula One. It's the pinnacle, and I find that fascinating. I really do. But I do enjoy off road motorcycling, like trials, etc., extreme enduro, and I've done a couple of books with a couple of those protagonists as well. But it's nice to have a bit of both, a bit of the glamour of F1, with all that goes with it, and then standing
Right.
on a mountain, seeing somebody on a motorbike sort of go past you at sort of 100 miles an hour, who's been on the road for 9 hours, and he's on the on the brink of exhaustion, and etc. It's great. But yeah, I love motorsport. I love motorsport. I really do.
I've only seen one Formula One race, and I was surprised by two things: how loud it was, and also the precision, the with just inches to spare. And it almost seems superhuman that those drivers can be that precise at such a speed.
Yeah, they're separated by literally thousandths of a second.
Mhm.
So somebody can be on pole position, and the person behind them can be something like 4 or 5 thousandths of a second behind them. And that's kind of like, it's very difficult for the human mind um, to get their head. You can't. It's like infinity. How do you comprehend infinity? The human mind wants a beginning and an end, so you can't comprehend infinity, not naturally,
Right.
really. And it's the same with
Right.
that. How on earth do we get our head around 4 thousandths of a second? It's whereas in F1, it's commonplace. It's intrinsic to what they do. Everything is
Right.
it's so exact. But I couldn't be a fan of any one sport all the time. Like some people are dedicated to one team in soccer or American football or whatever, or cricket. I like cricket. Cricket is something that you do have in America. There are
Yeah.
there are teams all over the place, but most people, you can have a game in cricket or a match that lasts 5 days and can end up in a draw, but can be the most exciting spectacle you've ever seen. It's incredible. So sport has a lot to offer. It really, really does.
No doubt. Okay,
Yeah.
so last question about you. Do you happen to have any secret hobbies that very few people or no one knows about, like
Oh
skydiving,
God.
stamp collecting?
Yeah. No. The only thing I meditate. I practice mindfulness, which is, I think, quite a Californian thing. I think,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's something that anybody who knows me will think, no chance, because I like a drink and a smoke and etc. Swear a bit. So and like F1, like like rock music, whatever. But yeah, so that's the thing that I would say top of the list that is um, not normally associated with somebody who does what I do. I should think
Okay.
and live the
Now,
life I love.
right. Are you a concert goer by any chance?
Yeah, I do. I'm big into classical music, so hugely into classical music. But concert-wise, yes. I have a very sort of Catholic taste. I'll go and say anything. The best gig I've ever seen in my life is Rammstein, the German industrial metal
Oh,
band. Huge. I
yes,
mean,
very
fantastic.
familiar.
Not massively into their. I like their music, but live, the spectacle is incredible. But Queen, I've seen Queen quite a few times and stuff like that. So loads of orchestras. So I'll watch anything. I really will.
Okay. I am
Yeah.
so jealous of seeing Queen and Rammstein. I
Well, Queen are just about to tour the US.
what's that?
Queen are just about to tour the US with Adam Lambert.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and I think they're going. They certainly play a couple of nights at the LA Forum, and I'm pretty sure they go to San Francisco as well. But yeah, they're doing a nationwide tour, and then they're going to Japan and Australia, and then Europe. So they're still doing it. Obviously, it's not Freddie Mercury, but it's still a very very good show. I saw
Right.
them at Madison Square Garden a couple of years ago. They were enormous. They
I've
were immense.
yes, I have seen that video of them at Madison Square Garden. I did not know that they're about to, so it's still possible to see Queen.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Well,
But
half of them.
unfortunately,
Half
have you
of
ever
them.
seen Elton John by any chance?
No, I've seen various concerts with him on sort of YouTube and stuff, and I'm of the opinion he probably should have given it up a little while ago. He's now given it up. I know he has, but
Right.
I love Elton John. But he's one of those ones I'd love to have seen him in his pomp, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's my understanding that you write for the Sunday Times, and as you have mentioned, you're a ghostwriter. And I find the ghostwriting to be interesting. I've only interviewed one other writer before that is a ghostwriter, and I'm wondering if you could go into that a little bit, and uh, could you estimate approximately how many books there are out there that do not say written by James Hogg on them, but you
Oh
did write
God.
them?
Well, I've only written 30. I've written 30, so
Okay.
which is still so that there are, I think there are 5 million books published a year. So there's quite a few that don't have my name. But I am quite I suppose I've only been doing it 10 years, 12 years maybe. So, I've written sort of 30 books in quite a short space of time. And not all of them have been bestsellers, of course, but they've all been interesting. But I have a slightly different model in the sense that most of the ghostwriters I know they have a literary agent, and they will be approached by the literary agent who will say, blah blah's doing a book, a famous person's doing a book, they're looking for a ghostwriter, would you be interested? And they might say, yes, I am. And if they get the job, they're given a fee, and then it's very much it's a transactional relationship. It is purely transactional. So you do the job, you come away, that's it. You might get an acknowledgement in the book. What I do is I will find somebody I admire and would like to write a book with, like Gunter Steiner, like Bernard Cribbins, like Brian Blessed, like Timothy West, etc., Damon Hill and Johnny Herbert. And I will approach them and I will say, let's do a book. I will give them a reason why. Usually it has something to do with money. And they'll say, okay, fine. It's non-committal. So what I'll do is I'll write a proposal, and my literary agent will take that out to market. And then if we get the deal that we would like, that we're happy with, we go ahead and we write the book. And so it means that I personally am far more invested in the project, not just financially, but in every respect. It's my idea. I brought the idea to the table, so it's much more of a partnership. So as opposed to it being transactional, it's relationship based, if you see what I mean. So it is a partnership, and it's always worked for me. I've done one or two where my agent has come to me and said, blah blah wants to do a book. What do you think? I like them. I'll talk to them. Let's see if we can get something off the ground. But I wouldn't do it as a matter of course. So I have a slightly different. Other people do it my way as well. Journalists, etc., will approach people, but it's not the norm. So I'm very, very proactive. I'm always writing emails to people saying, you know, I think you should do a book, you know, and this is why I think you should do a book, and this is why I think you should do it with me. Yeah, why not? It's like when lockdown happened, everybody had their livelihoods taken away from them immediately, like DJs and things. So there's a guy called Paul Oakenfold who was the sort of the first ever superstar DJ, if you like. He kind of invented like club culture as we know it today. He was part of that movement that started in Ibiza. It's, you know, you used to have a DJ in the corner of a room who would play music. Nobody cared about them, and people would dance. And then, you know, there'd be a slower music section at the end where you try and grab a hold of somebody and pull. And then they came along, and it was all, obviously the music was very different. The focus was the DJ, and it was like, well, hey, let's have a party. It was a completely different atmosphere. The whole, everything was different. They completely changed how people enjoy themselves nocturnally, shall we say. And so I got in touch with him and I said, you're not doing anything at the moment. All the nightclubs are closed. Let's write a book. He's like, yeah, all right, okay. You know, so it's that sort of thing. He's looking for opportunities as opposed to sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. Where's the fun? Where's the challenge? You know.
Mm-hmm. So you found a little bit of a silver lining in the COVID lockdown.
Sorry, say again.
You found a little bit of a silver lining during the COVID lockdown.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I most certainly did, because you've got to try and turn. Obviously, COVID was tragic in many ways for many people, etc. But you know, there was a lot of people there. There are certainly ways you can always make, and I'm not just talking financially. I know a lot of unscrupulous people made a lot of money from COVID, you know, etc. Walked away with billions, blah blah blah. This was more of a case of just trying to keep the, you know, the wolves off my back and keep the money coming in and still have some fun, etc. And it goes full term. So if I come up with an idea that sells and they want to do it, and you know, book sales during COVID went woof. They went because obviously what are people doing? So people need books. People want to read books. So we've got to keep writing the books. So you know, it's feeding the animal, and that's what I did. I thought, well, okay, so I was more productive during COVID than I probably ever have been. I was sending out more emails, and I think I probably wrote 5 books. There's probably 5 people I wrote books with I've never actually met face to face.
Wow.
Everything was done like this.
Okay. Now, did you meet Mr. Cribbins face to face?
Oh, loads of times. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I went to his house in Weybridge. Beautiful old house on a little river where him and Jill used to fish. He was a big fisherman, was Bernard. That's what he was most famous for, other than acting, was fishing. And and he was sitting there. There was a program in the UK that was very, very famous for in the 70s called Jack and Ori. And it was like a storytelling. So it was on at about 5 o'clock on a weekday, and somebody would sit there and they would basically tell you a story, and they would sit there in front of the camera, and it would be intercut with illustrations that would sort of bring the book to life, etc. So the illustrations, you know, the narrator, very simple concept, but very, very effective. And it ran for a very, very long time. And it's what Bernard's probably most famous for, together with Doctor Who and the Wombles, I would say. And when I went to his house, he actually had the whole thing about Jack and Ori. They have Jack and Ori chair, big high-backed chair, where they'd sit and tell these stories, etc. And Bernard actually had one of these in his living room, and he would sit there and And I remember on the first day of the interviews, I put my recorder down on the table, and I just said, "Off you go." And he just said, "My name's Bernard Cribbins, and I'd like to tell you a story." And then started to
Oh,
tell me the story of his life. It was amazing, really was. But I got to know him and his wife Jill quite well. It was a very, very nice period.
okay, wonderful. Now I'm looking forward to Sunday when this is released on audio, and I'll be able to listen to it in streaming. And it has some absolutely amazing rave reviews. And I'm wondering if you could maybe tell me. I understand that it's 9 hours unabridged, and what can I expect when I listen to this?
Unfortunately, it isn't Bernard, which is tragic. We couldn't get Bernard to do it before he died. We tried and we
Mhm.
tried, but he just wasn't well enough. But the chap who's done it, Gordon, is was a big fan of Bernard's and has done 300 or 400 of these. So he's well versed. He knows what he's doing. So it's the next best thing. But it's Bernard's life story. As I said, he wasn't a diarist. So this was sort of quite spontaneous, all of this. And he was sort of thinking back, and then I would go away and write something. And then he'd ring me up and he said, I've remembered something. I've just remembered something, which is always the way. And then I would send him what I'd written. And then he would come back again and said, I've remembered something else. So it was very sort of organic in that respect. So, but it's very, very conversational. So it is the whole idea of what Bernard and I wanted to do with this was to write it in a way that it was just like him sitting down and telling you a story. So it's done in a very, very sort of conversational, very warm way, which isn't to everybody's cup of tea. I think somebody and my brother told me that there were some reviews on Amazon or somewhere that said that the only complaint, I didn't like the way it was sort of told in a conversation. Some people like the dry sort of, nondescript way, but what's the point? Bernard was and still is one of the most popular and famous raconteurs, storytellers in the United Kingdom. So why on earth would you write it in a dry, a dry way that's sort of nondescript? It has to be Bernard. So we did that on purpose, very much on purpose. So it was almost like he was sitting down, bedtime story type thing, in a chair. You're lying in bed. He's sitting in a chair, tells you a couple of chapters. You go to sleep, goes out, comes back, does the same again. That was the kind of thing we wanted to recreate. But yeah, it's basic. It's not a basic autobiography, but it's the life of Bernard Cribbins, and he had a very good memory for his very young life, which is good because, as I said, he wasn't a diarist, so there weren't things written down or anything like that. It was all from up there. But he did a great job. My only regret is that I wish I got him 10 years earlier when he was in his late 70s, because there'd have been more there, if you know what I mean. We did struggle with a few bits where I had to go away and do some research, which is no problem, not a problem, but a few more sort of first-hand accounts. And he actually said, "I wish you got me in my 70s," but we still did a good job, and it's an extensive book. And yeah, it certainly did the job. I'm so glad we did it. For Bernard Cribbins to have left this earth without there having been somebody recorded his life, that would have been tragic.
Wow. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Now, I've heard Mr. Cribbins referred to as a national treasure more than once. And what I'm wondering, for you as a writer, how does it feel to have been able to do this with Mr. Cribbins?
Oh, that's a very good. It's a simple question, but it's a question I've never been asked before. And it's very, very. It makes me smile because I remember the time when I actually sat down with him, and I was so. I don't often get starstruck, if you know what I mean, because you do it for a living. It's like Formula One. So I go to F1, and people who visit the paddock, visit a race, going, "Oh my God, this is the most amazing thing on earth." If you actually work in it, you're doing the same thing with the same people at a different track, it kind of, where's the novelty soon wears off. And it does with sort of celebrities, because they're only people, but with Bernard, it was different. He had this sort of aura about him. And there were so many memories, my own memories. As soon as I saw him, I was like, Perks from the Railway Children, Doctor Who. There were so many things. And the most recognizable voice. So that voice, hearing the voice, was just astonishing. So I would sit there and I'd almost, I'd be sitting there having something to eat and he'd be watching television. And then suddenly he'd speak. And it's like, God, you're sort of back in the room. It's Bernard Cribbins. It's like, bloody hell. It's amazing. So it was a joy. There are certain books I've done. I've done one that's come out today actually with a guy called Timothy West, who's a British actor married to an actress called Prunella Scales, who they're two, again, national treasures. And working with him has been very sort of similar, because you just sit there and you do have to pinch yourself a little bit. And Bernard was part of so many of my favorite stories that he told, TV programs. He kind of transcended the genre of entertainment, really. He really did. A lot of people say, oh yeah, they did everything. Yeah, okay, they might have done films and TV or whatever, but he really did. He did films, TV, radio, theatre. He did the lot. Many times. He was prolific in every medium going. But most importantly, I could have turned up to Bernard's and he could have been an arsehole. He could have been a grumpy old man or whatever, or we might not have got on. There could have been a clash of personalities. But he was so warm and welcoming. And he kind of, his character and his behavior towards me complemented everything. It was like the cherry on top of the cake. It was amazing. So it was probably one of the best periods of my entire life. I can't not smile when I talk and think about Bernard.
Well, then it seems like you were obviously the correct person to do this.
Of course I was. No, I was. No, I definitely was. I'm not saying that anybody couldn't have, somebody couldn't have done as good a job or even a better job or whatever, but I was the right person to talk to him and get what we needed to get, because I was, I came up with the idea. I persuaded him to write the book. So yeah, I mean, I'm always like that. It's like with F1. There's lots of people and soccer or whatever who would look at a book that I've written and think, well, blah blah could have done a better job. So yeah, but they didn't think of it, did they? So there you go, bugger off. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now, for somebody looking at your success, somebody that just had a book came out today, someone that would like to emulate what you have done. There may be someone young or old out there that's going to watch or listen to this that aspires to do the same as you have. I'm wondering, do you have a formal educational background in writing?
No. I left school at 15. So, and I stopped learning probably when I was about 13. So I'm not really formally educated to any great degree. I'm sort of self-taught. So, and I don't actually read, believe it or not. So really? I have read, but I'm not a voracious reader. I don't read books. I just sort of fell into this, and I happened to be able to chuck a narrative together quite well, I think. And I have some sort of instinct for grammar. I don't know. It's very, very strange. Lots of people, when I tell them, either don't believe me or look at me as if I'm really, really strange, because I'm supposed to have written 30 books, mainstream books as well. You can't get away with writing. Anybody can write a book and get it published, anybody. But to write a mainstream book that's going to sell in the mainstream, in supermarkets, etc., bookshops, it's got to be of a certain standard, and only an editor can only be responsible for so much. There will be a point where an editor just goes, sorry, there's nothing I can do with that. So editors are fantastic. That's what I'd like to be if I've been educated, and if I went and did my English degree or whatever. I think editors are amazing people. I think editing is you've got to be right up there. You really do. A lot of respect, a lot of time for editors. Working with a good editor, someone like me who I'm not, would never consider myself as an author or a writer even. I'm just somebody who writes for a living, if you know what I mean. I'm not one of these people who will go and spend, months torturing myself over a page and I've got writer's block. It's a job of work. It really is a job of work, something I can do to a fairly decent standard and something I enjoy immensely. And I really, really do. But I don't take it or myself very seriously, really.
Okay.
Which is probably, if I did, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't
Okay.
work. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you mentioned writer's block, and there's a question I like to ask of all artists and performing artists, because it seems that there is one very common link, which is something called rejection, where you may work on something and have the most wonderful project that you've ever done and present it only to be ignored or just turned down or told that this doesn't fit in at this time or something like that. Have you experienced a downside such as that? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, loads of times. Rejection is something that you have to be okay with. Nobody likes being rejected, but you have to accept it. It's part of life. Whatever you do, you're gonna experience rejection. So, or you're gonna experience a knockback or whatever. So, yeah, there's loads of things. I've come up with an idea that I've thought was the best idea ever, and I might have written a proposal and it's gone out and absolutely nobody's interested in it. And you believe in that idea so much that, but it's an experience. It's like a reaction from the press. When I wrote a book about a guy called Kenny Everett, who's again a national treasure over here. He invented in this country character radio. So as opposed to just the usual DJ sort of going, I had a nice day mowing the lawn yesterday. Anyway, here's the Beatles. He was the guy who sort of had, he turned it into something completely different. And he was a bit of a comedian on TV, but he's huge in the UK. So Kenny Everett, Everett, he's enormous, and one of the biggest talents ever to touch British entertainment, world entertainment, and he's hugely respected. And I co-wrote his authorized biography with the cooperation of his family. And I remember when it came out, it was only my third book, so it was quite a while ago. And we got a really nice review in the Times by somebody called Lynn Barber, and then we had this huge launch for the book in London, at a big hotel, loads of people. It was massive. It was a huge thing, for somebody because I still wasn't working full time as a writer. I still wasn't writing full time, and I remember waking up the day after that thinking that I was sort of everything was just fantastic, and opened up this newspaper called The Observer, and there was this horrible review, and the first line of the review was, "I've always hated Kenny Everett," or something like that. And I thought, well, we didn't stand a fucking chance. And she laid into the book and to Kenny Everett and to me and to my co-writer, and I took that so personally. And it was my agent Tim Bates who's done every book I've ever done, and he's he's the only person I work with on a day-to-day basis, because it's very insular being a writer. You have to branch out, you have to touch base with people unless you're totally happy being on your own. And Tim's the person I speak to, most often, apart from my wife and my kids, probably, and my brother. And it was at the start of my relationship with Tim. And he said to me something along the lines of, "Look, it's only a book. Nobody cares." And I was immediately, I was like, "What? Of course they can." And I think I had a train journey back to Leeds, 2 or 3 hour train journey. I thought about it. I thought, well, he's absolutely right. We're not writing the satanic verses, for God's sake. This is a book, and the people who like Kenny, we didn't write it for that person who wrote the thing in the review. It wasn't. We didn't write the book for her. we wrote the book for people who love Kenny, and everybody who I know
Right.
who loves Kenny
Right.
appreciates the book for what it is, which is a homage to a huge talent and personality. So I think what they do in newspapers, they sometimes they'll give somebody they know is going to hate it, so they have a shit review. Yeah,
You
fine,
think
that's fair
so?
enough. So yeah, I know, strange, isn't it? So that's fair enough. But it was a learning curve. It was a learning curve, and it's something I've always remembered. And Tim's an amazing. He's an amazing agent. He knows so much, but he's also a really good person. He's a good friend. He's one of my best friends, and it's something I'll always remember. Just it's only I do think it's only a fucking book. Pardon my
Right.
French. And it
Yep.
is. It's only a book, and the people, the right people, the people who you've written it for will like it, or most of them will, and that's all that matters. That's all that matters. So, yeah, that sort of gave me made me think about things like knockbacks, made me look at them,
Okay.
take them into perspective, as opposed to it taught me how to respond as opposed to react. So responding is the sort of, oh my God, you immediately just go, everything's shit. How dare you do that? Blah, blah, blah. Whereas you respond, you think about it, you you consider it first, and then you see it for what it is. And
Right.
it's just a planted shit review in a newspaper that everybody will have forgotten about in 10 minutes. Who cares?
Very well put. And
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, do you read reviews of your work? And apparently you do.
I don't anymore. I don't anymore. I don't
Not
anymore
anymore.
because there's no point, because you can't. To what end? To what end?
Right.
Because you
Right.
can't please everyone all the time. So you're always going to get good. You're going to get bad. But what's the point of reading them? Because you'll read a good one, you'll think that's fantastic, and then underneath it will be a shit one. So
Right.
you know, and if somebody comes up to you, this Gunter Steiner one that I've done, that's probably the biggest book I've ever written. It's been translated into, I think, 12 languages, and it's just been published in the States, and it's massive. And I've had loads of people come up to me and said, I really enjoyed that. It's a really, really good fun. But fortunately, nobody's ever come up to me and said, Hoggy, that was what a pile of shit. But I wouldn't mind, because it's subjective, isn't it? As I said, you can't please everyone all the time. The Quran, the Bible, loads of people, they worship those tomes and they live their life by them. But I know loads of people who think they're a complete pile of muck and don't believe a word, think it's rubbish. So who cares? It's only a book.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, I got one final question about you today as an author. When you decided to start writing, did you happen to have any mentors around you? Anyone that propped you up, lifted you up, and said, "Hey, you're really good at this. You need to pursue this."
That was Tim. There's also a guy called Robert Sellers. So I wrote my first 3 books, I think. Yeah, 3 books with a guy called Robert Sellers, who's a very prolific biographer. He writes a lot of books. His most famous book is a book called Hellraisers, which was basically a compendium of bad behavior. It was all about Richard Harris, Oliver Reed, Richard Burton, and I think Peter O'Toole. And it was a history of the 3 of them getting shit-faced, pissed, drunk. Sorry, pissed. I know pissed means angry in America. So drunk in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. And he did really, really well. But Robert is such a good writer. He's such a good biographer. He writes books about, he did a fantastic book about, he did the history of Monty Python, how George Harrison brought it together, etc. He's done so many, social commentary. He's fantastic. He's well worth looking up. Robert Sellers is a very clever guy. And he was the chap who basically helped me with my first, because they were my ideas, the first 3 books. And the publisher who approached me about the first one, about a guy called James Robertson Justice, who's a huge bearded actor who was around in the 40s, 50s, and 60s mainly. I couldn't write, and he sort of said you should, because I'd created a website about James Robertson Justice, and the publisher got in touch and said you should do a book on him. I said, well, I can't write. I'm as thick as mince. And he said, I'll put you in touch with Robert. He'll help you. Robert's done lots of books, and Robert helped me for 3 books, and then I sort of flew the nest, and he carried on, but we're still great friends. I'm hugely admiring of him, because he's carried on. He writes books. He doesn't ghost. He does it. He's very passionate about what he does. He's sort of the opposite of me. I'll go off and I'll write a book that is Gunter Steiner or Timothy West or Bernard Cribbins that will go into a supermarket, and he'll sit there and he'll painstakingly write something that'll. I'll do that in a month, and he'll do something that'll take him a year, and might sell a few thousand copies, but he's a real labour of love, and he's a considerable tome. It's there to say it serves a purpose. It's filling a gap in history, if you know what I mean. So I'm hugely reminded. So, but him and Tim Bates, my agent, Robert Sellers, my co-writer, I've been very, very lucky. And without those two, I wouldn't be responsible for the crimes against literature that I've sort of gone on to write since.
Okay. All right. We are running up on the time limit of that hour that I asked you for here. I only have just a couple of more questions. What is the actual writing process like for you? Do you sit down at a typewriter with a blank piece of paper and type the title?
No. So the title usually comes at the end. We have a working title. So say if I'm writing an autobiography, a straightforward autobiography, I will ask whoever has agreed to do the book with me. I'll say, right, I need a timeline from the day you were born until the present day, and I need you to put as many things, as many events, memories, etc. That first line of a memory. So, born then, went to school here, this happened then, and I need it to be as I need it to be as long as possible. I need it to cover everything. There is certain about, if they're famous, I'm going to know a certain amount of things anyway beforehand, but there's a lot I won't know. And then once they send me that, if some people will send me something that they have done work on it, some people will send me a page, and I do have to be, doesn't matter how famous they are, I will say it's not good enough. I need more. If you want your money, if you want the advance, if you want this to work, which they all do, just do it. Some of them, it's a time thing. And so they get it sorted, and then I'll break it into chapters, and then we'll start. I'll say, okay, today we're going to talk about this, and we'll sit and chat for a couple of hours, and I will literally listen back to what they've told me, and I will write it. Not obviously verbatim; it would never work. I'll write it in their voice, but as a narrative, as a story, and do it like that, and I'll change it as we go. But that's how I do it. So with Brian Blessed, who's an actor, very recognizable, I actually, to get into character, to make sure that I had his voice on the page, I listened. I did the same thing with Bernard to an extent. I will talk as I'm doing it. So to try and do sort of an impression, it sounds bizarre, but it's kind of the way I do it, to prevent it from being dry and to try and get into their character. There are certain words that people use, buzzwords, I think you call them, certain phrases, etc. So I'll listen to that. But yeah, that's what I do. I'll listen to the interview, try and do it chronologically if I can, and just sit there and write it.
Okay. So you said the title comes last. So when you did the one for Mr. Cribbins, you
that came at the very end.
Okay, so the Bernard Cribbins, 75 years of doing just about everything, that would have came last.
Bernard Who, 75 years. He came up with Bernard Who, and I don't know where he got it. I think he'd done a radio show based on his life that was called Bernard Who. I don't, it was a little bit ambiguous. I'm not hugely happy with it. I think we could have come up with something. I think I came up with something which was it referenced one of the songs he did, because he did novelty songs. He had several hit records in the early 50s, produced by George Martin, just before he worked with the Beatles. One each end and steady as we go, which is a line from Right Said Fred, which is very recognizable, but he didn't like that. And I came up with the 75 years of doing just about everything, which kind of encapsulated, well, it's what he did. He did just about everything. But sometimes you'll come up with a working title, like the Gunter Steiner one I did. He was famous from being in a show called Drive to Survive, which is huge on Netflix. So I called the book Surviving to Drive, which is a play on that, which
Right.
makes it instantly recognizable. So, and that I came up with that at the beginning and it stuck. But usually you nail it at the end.
Okay. And who did the cover art?
That would have been the publisher. And
Okay.
the I know the photo was taken several years ago. Again, the chair he's in,
Mhm.
on the cover, etc. So it was taken probably about 10 years ago. That.
And he had a chair like that in his living room.
Yeah. What you
Yeah.
call a Jackanory chair. Yeah,
Yeah.
a high back armchair. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to wrap it up here, but I do have to ask you, are you a fan of that British quirky sci-fi drama called Doctor Who?
Yes, I am. I've just started listening to The Big Finish. I've never listened to
Oh,
the audio productions before, and I do it as an age thing, but I'm starting to listen to more audiobooks, and I love radio. I'm hugely into radio plays and things like that. But yeah, I love the two Peter Cushing films,
mhm.
which I grew up with. But I was a John Pertwee, Tom Baker fan, huge John Pertwee, especially John Pertwee. I watched I've got them all on DVD, and I do watch them back. I watch the John Pertwee ones, but I also love David Tennant. So I watched David. I think David Tennant's a bit of a genius. I think he's an immense actor. I really do. I think he's probably It's subjective, of course, it's subjective, but I think he's probably the best actor who's ever played Doctor Who. Some people might say Chris Eccleston or something like that, but no, I think he's a considerable actor, and he's
Well,
perfect for that. Right? He's perfect. To me, him and Pertwee are my two favorites.
okay. So it sounds like
Yeah,
you have some enjoyment coming up. If you've just gotten into Big Finish, there are some wonderful Big Finish Doctor Who stories.
yeah,
And then, of course, we're going to have David Tennant back as the Doctor again here in just a couple of months. So,
yeah. I know. So it's a good time. I mean, I love the fact. I tell you what, I remember. I remember when Doctor Who came back with Chris Eccleston, and I remember the teasers that they did on BBC One for that. And as somebody who grew up with Doctor Who, and I literally did used to hide behind the sofa at the end of an episode when the music was fucking terrifying. That it was Jesus, it really was. And the Zygons, I still have nightmares about the Zygons. I really do. And I remember the teasers for that, and I remember one that was on Oxford Street, and just out of the way you just saw the TARDIS. It was incredible, and it was a big thing in the UK. It really was. Doctor Who coming back, but really coming back. And that was a really good time to be in the UK. It really was when Doctor Who came back. It was huge. And Chris Eccleston, I wish he'd done a few more. I really do. I
mhm.
really do. But I understand why he cut it off when he did, because he's not remembered as being a doctor. He's still free from it, but part of it, if you know what I mean.
Right. Now, were
Yeah.
you watching Rose live when Doctor Who returned?
What you want? What? Sorry.
Were you watching the episode Rose live when Doctor Who returned?
Yes. Yes, I was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. For anyone who has watched or listened to this, thank Mr. Hogg for his time and a little bit of education here, and go and check out his works. Bernard Who is coming out this Sunday on audio. It's 9 hours unabridged. I have mine ordered. I cannot wait to put my headphones on and listen. And it was an absolute pleasure to be able to meet you, Mr. Hogg. Where do you like to be found online? I know you have some
Well, not.
insanely huge amount of Twitter followers.
Oh yes, indeed. I'm only 5'7". I always say to my sons, I'm small in stature but massive on Twitter. So well,
Yeah.
not massive at all. But I've got at least a few thousand. I hate the word followers. They're not followers. They're just people I sort of interact with or like what I post, if you know what I mean. But yeah. But yeah, Twitter's great. I used to hate Twitter. I used to think it was and Twitter is a cesspool or whatever you call it now,
Yeah.
X. It's just a big argument. But there is sort of what I tried to create on just feed on Twitter is just a kind of an oasis from all that sort of bile and hatred. Just somewhere where you can see something funny and sort of nice, really. But yeah. What was the original
How in the
question?
world did you? Yeah, I forgot. No, how in the world did you get to 30,000 followers? That's amazing.
By
Or
by
I'm
by
sorry,
posting by
not followers,
posting
but people.
people. Yeah, just by
Yeah.
posting funny things that make people laugh. Basically, that's what I do. And I'm sort of 70-80% that, posting bits
Mhm.
of like comedy sketches and funny things of all kinds of different people, but also a little bit about what I do. So a bit about Mr. Cribbins, a bit about Richard Briers. So I'm always waving the flag for people I've written books with or for. So that's what I do, and it's kind of I suppose it gives me a platform. I only have a good time on there. I've had a couple of people, probably 2 or 3 people in however many years, who I've had to say, no, you can fuck off, and I've blocked. But no, everybody's great, and it's a bit of fun. I'll put something on in the morning, and it's really nice. I get messages from people saying, "Yeah, it really made my day. I haven't seen that for donkey's years. Thank you so much for putting that on." And they say, "Oh, you're doing such a marvelous job." All I'm doing is posting other people's material, but if it makes people happy, it's fantastic. And I get to talk about a little bit about what I do. So I am actually writing a book at the moment, The Secret Diary of a Ghostwriter, because a
Oh,
ghostwriter
really?
has never written a mainstream book about what they do. So I've okayed it with the people I've written for, and so I'm doing a bit of a sort of adventures, secret diary of a ghostwriter. So I'm going to bring it all to life.
The Secret Diary of a Ghostwriter. Okay, well, you've just sold your first copy. I'm going to pick that one up for sure.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so final question here. For anyone young or old who would like to write an autobiography and they want to learn from you, would you have a single best piece of advice that you could give them?
Single best piece of advice. Take your time.
Okay.
Take your time, because when I started writing this book, which is slightly autobiographical as well, I sat down, and it is one of those things like Bernard, when we did the first draft. He looks at it. Oh, I've remembered something. Just take your time. Do it one bit at a time. Do a timeline. If you don't want to do your own autobiography, do a timeline, but do one section at a time. So maybe do one period. Maybe do a year. I helped a guy called Gary Newman write a book. Who's a pop star. He was huge in the '80s. Did electronic music, cars, and things like that. That was his biggest hit. And I was supposed to ghost his autobiography. And I only had about 4 days with him, and I wrote a draft. And he can write. I kept sort of encouraging him. So you can write. I'm helping you, but you should be doing this. And he sent back. He was so nice. He just said, I thank you so much for doing it, but I hate it. I'm going to try it myself. And he did. And he did it year by year. So 1962, 1963, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I could never. I could have spent 100 years with Gary Newman, and I would never have been able to write that, because it's totally personal, because he took his time, but he did it year by year. So I would say, just take your time. Do not try. Everybody wants. If I had £1 or $1 for every time somebody said, "Oh, I should do a book," or blah blah should do a book, yeah, well, fucking do it then. Oh yeah, well, I haven't got time. Well, make time, but take your time. If you're going to write, and just think about it, then do it. Seriously, I know it sounds really, really simple, but as I said, I'm not educated, and I don't read, but I've written 30 books. My last book was a #1 Sunday Times bestseller and was translated into 12 languages. I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but the point being, Christ, if I can do it, somebody who is not educated and doesn't read, and I'm not saying to anybody, I'm not advocating not reading or not taking education seriously, but anybody can write a book. I believe, I really do.
Okay.
Yeah, but take your
The
time.
next time okay, very good. Next time I hear that song, Cars by Gary Newman, I'm going to look at it a little bit differently. That's actually one of
Yeah,
my favorite songs there. And you
yeah.
met him.
He lives in San Pedro, or not San Pedro, San Fernando Valley. Is it the one that
Mhm.
in California, in LA, where the Bud
Yep.
Light? Yeah, he lives
Yeah.
down there, and I went to stay with him for a week, and he's lovely. His
Really?
wife, they've got a lovely family. They're lovely people, And I just thought it'd be great to write. But I knew he'd written. I knew he was capable of writing. And he's such a clever guy.
Mhm.
He's so creative. And as I said, I think we only had 3 or 4 hours a day for 4 days. We didn't have long, and I tried my best, and he hated it. But it kicked him into. He thought, well, no, I don't like what he's done, so I'm going to do it myself. And he came up with this fantastic autobiography that's done year by year, done very simply, but it's beautiful. It's absolutely fantastic. So at least if I hadn't my role by coming up with something with just a few hours that wasn't up to his standard, wasn't what he wanted, kicked him into writing the book that he wanted, with all his fans wanted. So yeah, fantastic. But you see, you can't have an ego. Being a ghostwriter, you have to leave your ego at the door. A lot of people, other writers, might have been really offended by that. The fact that he basically sacked me. He didn't sack me. I still got paid, but he sort of said, "No, I really don't like what you've done, so I'm going to do it myself." But fantastic, because the end product, everybody said he got paid, I got paid, and we got his fans got got the book that everybody wanted. So yeah, that's a good thing.
Okay, wonderful. So are you going to write James Hogg by James Hogg?
Now, I don't know. No, never. No. Good Lord, no. But I will do. My wife, she doesn't like nonfiction, and she's never read one of the books I've written. And she said the only book I will read that you write is one that is about your life as a ghostwriter. So that's kind of, and my sons are the same. They're sort of 18 and 14. They're not interested in Bernard or etc. So I'm kind of doing it almost for them, really.
Okay.
So they might actually read something I've written for once.
And what is the title again?
And it's going to be the Secret Diary of a Ghostwriter, but that's just a working title.
Okay, Secret Diary of Ghostwriter. So
of a ghostwriter.
Of a ghostwriter. So if the working title changes, you'll let everyone know online, right?
Oh yeah, on X or Twitter. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be banging the drum about that one.
Okay.
Constant. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Mr. Hogg, thank you very much for your time.
James,
I've been looking forward to this. And
only my lawyer and my accountant call me Mr. Hogg. So
okay, James.
So yeah. Seriously, that makes me nervous. So yeah, it's just James. Yeah.
Okay. It's really nice to meet you. Thank you so
too.
much. Okay.
My pleasure. Pleasure.
Have a nice evening.
Let me know when it's up, and I'll
absolutely.
I'll plug the hell out of it, definitely.
Okay, and I will do the same, and I will see you around on the wires.
You will. Take care.
Okay. Take care. You too, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.